Welcome to the Nonprofits. In our first installment of Churches Behaving Badly this week comes from the good old boys down in the Southern Baptist Convention. Helen Green, tell us about what kind of hornet's nest they've been stirring up down there.
So, hey, Southern Baptist Convention, sexism is showing. Apparently, reading The Handmaid's Tale as a guidebook, the SBC has declared that no, women cannot hold a pastor position in their congregations. And if a church dares to allow women to preach, well, dear viewer, the SBC will remove said church from its coalition of worship centers. Now, as many are suspecting, this may be a controversial distraction to shift the public's focus away from allegations of child sexual abuse. The SBC would surely like it if we forgot all about that. Sorry, not sorry. When any institution just keeps doing things that draw the ire of believers and atheists alike, scrutiny will follow. This story comes from AP News by Peter Smith that was published on June 6, 2024.
All right, Helen, it sounds like they got quite a bit going on down there. What are some of the immediate effects of this move on the part of the SBC?
So with the SBC, what's going on with the SBC is that they basically voted that you can still, if you want to be part of the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, and be under the umbrella where you get money and funding and support, you can allow women preachers to be part of your congregation. Even if there's been there's 47,000 churches that are under the SBC. And there's quite a bit of those that have had women pastors in positions of leadership. But now they're saying okay, you can, if you want to keep your women pastors, you no longer get the funding. You don't get any more money. You don't get that support. So they're basically putting those churches in kind of a stranglehold, because basically they're saying you can continue to, if you want to continue with your, women having leadership as part of your congregation, that's fine, but you're not going to get any more support from the SBC. So go ahead.
So I was just going to say, so they're saying that's fine. We're just not going to help you. We're just not going to support you. It's like you're on your own if you want to do that kind of a thing.
Right. And the problem is that because a lot of even people within the in these Baptist churches, they are not agreeing with this very conservative sort of reading of scripture and saying that, this has to be a thing. And that's causing a lot of issues. And as far as for the churches kind of figuring out what they're going to do, because ethically, they're kind of put between a rock and a hard place. Do we keep our women pastors who may have been serving for years and get rid of their positions, put them maybe in more of an administrative role? Or B, do we keep them as pastors and lose all the funding support of the SBC? And that's we talked a little bit about this on a previous episode about this coming forward, because there's been a lot of problems with the Southern Baptist Convention the past couple of years, and there's been a lot of controversy, which we'll touch on more in a little bit. But as I was saying, it could be that there's some more troubling things going on, and they're trying to deflect this because they know that feminist talking points tend to, get people's emotions up when, they have, bigger problems going on.
Aaron, does this type of move say anything about the theology involved here? I mean, do they have proper biblical standing, or is there a proper biblical standing with this?
Well, that's the thing. Controversies like this, to me, just show that the real power behind the throne here isn't God, it's the people that are involved. Because, the Abrahamic God is supposedly the tri-omni God, omni-powerful, omni-benevolent, omni, whatever the last one is, I can't remember. But supposedly for an omni-powerful God, his message is really, really hard to get across in a straightforward way. why is there any controversy in the church over what the right thing to do is? Why is there any controversy over what the proper interpretation of Scripture should be? When your God is all powerful, shouldn't God be powerful enough to get the right message across? Why are there different interpretations? Why, in the article, it says that critics say the convention shouldn't enshrine a constitutional rule based on one interpretation of its non-binding doctrinal statement. Why are there any interpretations? Why isn't God clarifying how things are supposed to be?
You'd think it should be really obvious, right?
You would think that God would be able to clear it all up, right? And make it not confusing. Why are there any non-binding doctrinal statements? Isn't God power enough to write his word on people's hearts consistently so there's no controversies? And the article also says, quote, the controversy complicates the already choppy efforts by the mostly white denomination to diversify and overcome its legacy of slavery and segregation. And this is a big problem in Christianity, because if you have a secular worldview, you can look back and think, well, everything sucked because people sucked, and we're growing and developing as a species to become better over time, right? But if you take a theological view, a biblical view, when you look back and see crappy things that Christians used to do, well, that's because God kind of maybe had something to do with it. And so then you have to think, well, God might have been kind of crappy. Well, instead of admitting that God is kind of crappy, there's all sorts of apologetics and explaining away and just all that kind of intellectual nonsense that goes on.
Well, I think your use of the word apologetics there was very generous, I should say. I think I think mental gymnastics is really part of what we're talking about there. But I want to jump over to Jason for a second. Jason, do you think that the Southern Baptist Conference is mainly concerned about aligning their policies with the Bible, or do you think there's some sort of ulterior motives going on here?
Man, I'm pretty sure we know where a lot of those people align politically. And I'm not endorsing or dissuading anybody, but a lot of times people who are more conservative are really good at playing the long game. Okay, so what's interesting to me is that people of color are the people who are most impacted by this decision. And it's a decision made by predominantly white, straight, cis, conservative men. In my opinion, what they're doing, they're kind of killing two birds with one stone. Excuse me. I don't know. The conservatives tend to have forethought in their pocket. They know how to play the long game. They're good at making decisions that stretch kind of far beyond what, the supposed reason that they're giving or the alleged target of their witch hunts. The lives of people of color intersect with many other groups and communities that fundamentalist conservatives are attempting to further marginalize. We can see queer people. People at and or below the poverty line, immigrants / refugees, the working class in general, certain people with certain healthcare concerns and risks. So what we're seeing here is the more diversity that's removed from the stage, from the pulpit, from like public eye, especially here in the States, being platformed is a big deal. People are taught to like automatically give that person who's being platformed, like they endow them with some sense of authority. So they understand that. So the less people you have representing these certain groups, the less overall pushback you're going to get from, the general public, and these power hungry hate mongers are going to, slide into these positions a little easier. There's a good band that kind of highlighted this. It said, you don't got to burn the books. You just have to remove them. And I think that's kind of what's going on here. Is we're calling this a woman thing, which is disgusting in general. But predominantly what we're seeing is that this is affecting predominantly Black churches. So that's,
Helen, what do you think about
gross.
Jason's take on there? Do you think that this is strictly a plan to minimize diversity and encourage homogeneity there?
Oh yeah, because there's progressive Baptist churches that are under the coalition, under the SBC, and they're going to be affected by this. So, and it's definitely going to affect also those, because a good portion of, and I'm not going to quote percentages because I'm going to be honest, I didn't look them up, but I know that some of these churches have people of color and that are in leadership positions and are women, and they're going to be affected and they're going to lose funding. And imagine if you are a church, a servicing a neighborhood that is predominantly people of color living at the poverty line, and you provide services to your community. You're providing services of like daycare, food, getting people connected so, they get job training and how to write a resume and get the education, because those are things that, some of these churches provide. Mm-hmm. If you don't have that money coming in from the SBC anymore, a lot of the programs are going to start getting, dried up, or they're going to have to, reallocate where that money's going to go. Or do you get rid of your women, again, in positions of authority in the church, give it to the men and push them aside and say, you know what, because of, biblical doctrine, you are lesser than in the church. And to be fair, that is in the Bible. Women are not supposed to speak in the church, and definitely not supposed to have positions of leadership. They're not supposed to be able to preach the gospel to, the wider congregation. So, at least I can say, the SBC is trying to be consistent, because this was they made a statement back in 1984 about this. But I think, because of political pressure and not being so much of a political issue, they just kind of let it slide, where women were allowed into positions of power and leadership within the church. But I think now, because we're seeing this backlash of the conservative right, the Christian right, who want to go back to this homogenous view of roles, for men and women in society. Right. But again, I think it's because there's some federal investigations of child sexual abuse going on at the,
let's hold off on that for a second there. I'll come back to that.
It up because it's a problem.
We'll come back to it for a second. I want to jump back to Aaron real quick here. Aaron, so obviously one effect here is going to be that there's going to be there's going to be fewer churches that are led by women or that have women in leadership positions. Do you think that that's going to catch? I mean, it's hard to imagine in today's world that this might be something that catches on, but clearly there's something motivating this change. We've proposed a couple of possibilities here. Do you think that this is going to catch on, and what kind of future is this going to hold for us?
Well, overall, the numbers are pretty clear across the country that the United States is becoming a more secular country. There are more atheists than there ever have been, fewer Christians. It's becoming a little more secular, a little less religious. And so, but that begs the question: how come they have an oversized, overweight, voice out in the world right now?
Right.
And I think part of me wonders, and this isn't mine, I think I've heard people say this before, is that maybe Christianity is moving more and more right because they're shrinking. And what's left is a more concentrated Christian that's more fundamentalist, that's more right, that's harder to convince that, maybe Christianity isn't true. The people that maybe are convincible are slowly leaving. And what's left are people that are more dogmatic, more fundamental. But I do think that eventually this decision, if it does go through, it will eventually be reversed, because if churches want to survive, they're going to need money. And to get money, they need butts in seats, and they need the butts in those seats to be donating money. Right. And so if the trend continues and fewer Christians are going to church and fewer Christians are going to give money, eventually that money, that's going to talk, and these churches they're going to have to get with the times and get more people in the seats.
So you think that congregations are going to be putting the same pressure on the SBC as the SBC is putting on these churches? They're just saying, hey, if you want the dollars, you're going to have to get in line, right?
I don't think congregations can put pressure on higher ups. I think Christianity is very much a top-down religion. It's very authoritarian. And so they're taught congregations are taught not to talk up, but to listen.
They can apply pressure with their attendance, though. Like you were saying, if they don't get the butts in the seats, they're not going to have the dollars, and they're going to lose all the influence.
Yes. If there are no more butts in seats, that's the only way that they can talk is is to stop giving money, stop attending, or some combination of both. Yeah.
So Helen, coming back to you now. So the story mentioned it in kind of in the weirdest way. The story mentioned that critics of the amendment, quote, wonder if the SBC has better things to do. And then they mention these accusations of sexual abuse in the churches. Can you expand on that a little bit? Do you think this is some sort of deflection or some sort of diversion?
I mean, okay, like this is something they have been discussing for a while. Like this was already they already made a statement back in, 40 years ago about women having, leadership positions within the Baptist churches. So this isn't like new to them. But I do find the timing, of it becoming an issue interesting.
Right. In some ways convenient, you might even say.
I know, weird. Because for those of you that actually read the article, there is a link from the Associated Press on the Southern Baptist Convention and the ongoing federal investigation of child abuse. So, and I kind of have a problem with this because I like with any sort of religious institution that these allegations prop up, they'll deflect. They won't take responsibility for what their leaders have done, and they will find some other boogeyman for people to focus their attention on. Right? For the SBC, it is women preaching the gospel. I don't know why that's scary.
Right.
Apparently it is. And I think it's because they're trying to deflect some of the heat that they're getting from the Department of Justice. Because they are looking at how not only these allegations of sexual abuse, but the mishandling of it were just like, we saw with like Jehovah's Witnesses where they weren't reporting these allegations. They were keeping it in-house. So those allegations are now coming to light. And all of a sudden, and I can't help but wonder, with the consolidation of the money, like if this is an excuse because these lawsuits are coming.
Okay. So they're trying to, make sure that they got plenty of money ready in case they have to make any court appearances and that kind of thing.
Because like that's what it feels like, if I was following the money trail, which I am, and because I want to mention again, it's been 40 years. This was not an issue for 40 years. Now all these allegations, there's a federal investigation of the of the Baptist churches of covering up child sexual abuse. Lawsuits are coming.
Okay.
And where you get that, that's easy way to get money, and then we'll use scripture as the reason because you can't argue with God.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Helen. Jason, I want to come back to you, and I want to ask this question to you, Jason, and also to the rest of the panel. We've all tried having conversations with fundamentalists before, and we've experienced that obstinate close-mindedness that they can show when we challenge their founding documents. So how would you try to make the case for gender equality to a person that has built their entire identity on a book that orders them to do otherwise? Jason, we'll go to you first. How would you make this case to somebody?
What a fucking question, man. God. I don't know. I mean, quickly, the first thing that pops to mind is, kind of question their trust in God. And I don't know, because this is a real deep question, because in the Bible, it says that anybody who's been put in a place of authority has been put there by God. Paul talks about it, Jesus talks about it.
Mhm.
So, and anything God has put in place, let no man remove, all that, we know all the shit. So I would challenge them and being like, well, this person obviously was put in a place of authority over you. I mean, are you saying you don't trust God? You don't trust God's plans? You're going to listen to these guys, to these men? I mean, this person's in authority. I mean, I don't know, because to me, the whole thing just seems divisive, kind of with what Helen brought up and with Aaron brought up, and then the shuffling around of legal issues and all this stuff.
Mhm.
What it makes it seem like to me is this is a rally cry to see who's going to back these guys up and who's not, because you got to think about it. If they're going to
test,
well, that's what it is. If they're going to use, if they're going to pull mutiny on their own pastor and sacrifice somebody that they're close to, that's family, that they're around for their convention, more or less for their own theological political party, they're willing to sacrifice somebody, then that shows them loyalty. I wouldn't be surprised if this whole thing is a dog whistle kind of rally cry, covery type thing that they're doing in plain sight because they have to, because people are going to get removed, but there's other motivations behind it. So I would just have to point towards the truth, but I mean, it's difficult. How are you going to argue truth with somebody who bows to authority, over empathy? I don't know. That's a big question to ask at the very end, man. It's ridiculous. Come on, dude.
Aaron, what are your thoughts? How would you make that case? How would you, if you were talking to somebody trying to convince them, if they're holding their Bible in one hand and you want to tell them about gender equality, what kind of things would you say to them?
Well, I would probably just try to go straight to the words of Jesus. Most Christians accept Jesus as, the ultimate authority. And, Jesus said to love one another, and treat other people how you would want to be treated. And so I would just try to argue, hey, Jesus said that everybody should be equal, that you should, love and serve everybody, your neighbor. And, what would Jesus do? Beyond that, I'd have to start, asking them questions about the nature of their faith and, where does the Bible come from? Who wrote the books in the New Testament?
Right.
What is the origin of this book? And if they can't, if that argument doesn't succeed, then you might have to bring out some bigger, deeper questions to get them to question their faith. But
Helen, let's give you the last word here before we wrap things up here. What would you say to somebody? How would you encourage gender equality to somebody who's kind of dug their feet into the ground and are bracing against any onslaught coming at them?
I would just remind the person that gender equality is always going to be a fight. And the fact that at the SBC, the only reason why women were allowed to have pastoral leadership is because some woman probably stood up and say, you know what, I want to be able to be a part of this congregation. I want to be able to use my voice to inspire people. Mm-hmm. That's how this happens. And though I don't like religion, I do believe that every person, regardless of gender, has the right to say what they want to say in the space that they occupy. Mm-hmm. So if you go along, and I do agree it's going to be tough, but if you go along what the SBC is saying, then basically you are saying that all the women and all the people that fought for your ability, that fought for your ability to be able to preach and say what you want to say, all that work that they did is completely mute now.
Right.
So if you want to see gender equality in the churches, then you have to stand on the shoulders of the people that fought for you the ability to be able to speak the way that you want to.
That was nicely put, Helen. I think that's an excellent place for us to wrap up here. And so thank you for joining me in that discussion, and thank all of you for watching. And if you want to watch more, click on these links.